Hey guys, I'm on historic Bourbon Street and I really want to talk about New Orleans EMS and their non-warm, unwarmed blood product protocol. Unfortunately, as you can tell, it's a little bit loud here. It's kind of a party street, so we're going to reconvene when I get back to the room and I can talk to you a little bit. See you later. Alright, I'm safe and sound, back in my room, and now we're going to talk about New Orleans EMS and the revolutionary use of pre-hospital whole blood. Imagine suffering some major traumatic event and you're bleeding internally, and every second matters. And instead of waiting until you reach the hospital for blood, paramedics begin transfusing life-saving blood right in the ambulance. That idea was once considered completely unrealistic. It was but a fever dream for us. Today, it's changing trauma care across America. One of the agencies that changed how we view pre-hospital blood and that are leading the charge is the New Orleans EMS system, with their groundbreaking unwarmed blood administration program. Unwarmed. In this video, we're diving into why New Orleans EMS started carrying blood, how their protocol works, who qualifies for blood transfusions in the field, the results they've seen, the challenges of running a blood program, and what EMS systems everywhere can learn from them. But before we jump in, do you think all advanced EMS systems should carry blood products? Let me know what your opinions are in the comments below. Let's talk about the background. For decades, trauma medicine followed a very frustrating pattern. Patients with severe bleeding often survived long enough to reach the hospital, only to die shortly after from hemorrhagic stroke. Research from military medicine during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan showed something that was phenomenally important. Early blood transfusion saves lives, not IV fluids, blood. Now, traditional IV fluids like normal saline or even lactated ringers can temporarily increase blood pressure, but they don't replace oxygen-carrying red blood cells or a patient's own clotting factors. In fact, too much saline can actually worsen trauma outcomes by diluting that clotting factor altogether. Military medics began using whole blood and blood component therapy closer and closer and closer to the point of injury, and miraculously, survival improved dramatically. Civilian EMS agencies then started to pay attention, like we often do to military medics. New Orleans EMS became one of the pioneering urban EMS systems to implement a field blood transfusion program using low-titer, O-positive whole blood that could be administered before hospital arrival. And unlike some hospital blood products, the blood that New Orleans EMS is carrying is unwarmed. Now that may sound alarming at first, but studies showed that rapid access to blood was often more important than delaying transfusion just to warm it, especially in very short urban transport environments. Now let's talk about how this program works. New Orleans EMS developed a very carefully controlled protocol for carrying and administering blood in the field. Specialized EMS units carry low-titer, O-positive whole blood in temperature-monitored coolers. This blood is designed to be universally compatible for most adult trauma patients. The coolers are continuously monitored to ensure the blood stays within safe temperature ranges. Paramedics undergo additional training in blood product handling, transfusion reactions, documentation, hemorrhage, shock recognition, and blood administration procedures. When crews identify a critically bleeding patient, they can begin transfusion before reaching the hospital. And this is important because trauma death from hemorrhage often occur very early. In this case, minutes matter. The transfusion process itself is surprisingly streamlined. Blood is administered through standard IV or IO access using approved tubing and monitoring procedures. EMS crews continuously reassess blood pressure, heart rate, mental status, signs of shock, and possible blood transfusion reactions. New Orleans EMS works closely with local trauma centers and blood banks to rotate blood supplies and minimize waste. That partnership is critical for keeping this program sustainable and manageable. So, who qualifies to receive blood? Not every trauma patient receives blood in the field. New Orleans EMS uses specific criteria to identify patients likely suffering from life-threatening hemorrhage. Generally, patients may qualify if they have a severe traumatic injury, if they're a trauma patient, signs of hemorrhagic shock, low blood pressure, rapid heart rate, altered mental status, penetrating trauma, or an evidence of major blood loss. Some protocols also consider mechanism of injury, like multiple gunshot wounds, stabbings, major motor vehicle crashes, or traumatic amputations. The goal is early intervention before cardiac arrest occurs. because once traumatic cardiac arrest happens from blood loss, survival rates drop dramatically. This approach reflects a major shift in EMS thinking. Instead of waiting for definitive hospital care, bring definitive resuscitation care to the patient. So what's your opinion on this? Should paramedics be expanding into more advanced treatments like blood transfusions, ultrasound, critical care medicine? Tell me your opinion in the comments. So, does pre-hospital blood actually work? The evidence increasingly says yes. Programs like New Orleans EMS have demonstrated that field blood administration is both feasible and safe. Patients receiving early blood products often show improved blood pressure, better perfusion, reduced shock progression, and potentially improved survival outcomes. Multiple studies nationwide have suggested early blood administration may improve survival in patients with severe hemorrhage. And importantly, New Orleans EMS, they've showed that urban EMS systems can successfully operate blood programs outside of helicopter services or some type of elite specialty team. And that's huge because it opens the door for wider adoption across civilian EMS. Another important finding, serious transfusion reactions in the field are rare, especially when protocols are followed carefully. The program also strengthened collaboration between EMS, hospitals, trauma surgeons, and blood banks. And in many ways, New Orleans EMS helped prove that EMS is no longer just transportation. Modern EMS is increasingly becoming mobile critical care. Now let's talk about the challenges, because maybe you have administration or some experienced paramedics that just aren't buying into this thought process. Of course, blood products are not easy to build. One of the biggest challenges is cost, because blood products require specialized storage, and temperature monitoring, and inventory tracking, and training, quality assurance, and coordination with blood suppliers. There's also the challenge of waste, because blood expires. EMS systems must carefully rotate in inventory with hospitals to avoid losing those valuable blood products. If you're like me, you get text messages all the time from organizations like the American Red Cross begging you to come donate blood because there's a shortage. We have to be good stewards of the resources that were provided. Another concern is logistics. Smaller EMS agencies may not have the medical oversight or funding or personnel or transport volumes that justify a program. Training is another major factor. Paramedics must understand shock physiology, blood administration techniques, recognition of transfusion reactions, even though they're rare, and strict documentation requirements. And then there's the medical debate. Some experts will question which benefits patients the most, getting them to definitive care or providing these blood products in the field. They'll debate whether whole blood or components are better, how much blood should be given pre-hospital, and whether every EMS system truly needs this capability. But despite these challenges, momentum behind pre-hospital blood continues to grow rapidly across our country. Regardless of your opinion or where you work or live, the New Orleans EMS system blood program teaches us several important lessons. First, innovation in EMS matters. Pre-hospital medicine continues evolving, and agencies willing to test evidence-based ideas can dramatically improve patient care. Second, partnerships are essential. Programs like this only succeed when EMS agencies, trauma centers, physicians, and blood banks work very closely together. And third, training and protocol saves lives. Advanced medicine in the field only works when crews are well-trained and supported. And finally, time matters in trauma. The sooner bleeding patients receive blood, the better their chances of survival. New Orleans EMS helped push EMS medicine towards a future where ambulances are not just transport vehicles, but true extensions of the emergency department and true extensions of definitive care. New Orleans EMS has become one of the leaders in pre-hospital blood transfusion, helping shape trauma care nationwide. This unwarmed whole blood program demonstrated that early blood administration can be practical, safe, and potentially life-saving in civilian EMS. And as more agencies adapt similar programs, the future of pre-hospital medicine may look very different than it did just a decade ago, or in my case, over 2 decades ago. So here's the question for you. Would you trust paramedics to administer blood to you or a loved one before arriving at the hospital? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and want more content about EMS innovation, emergency medicine, and trauma care, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.